Hey, welcome back to Lick of the Week videos. We've been looking at some ideas aimed at beginners, some concepts for these videos aimed at beginners. In the previous video, we began to look at the concept of ornaments for the left hand, and ornaments is just a fancier term for the things that you've heard before, you're familiar with: hammers and slides and chokes and pull-offs and push-offs. Things that you do to emphasize melody or to add some pizzazz to what you're already doing, be it a roll or a lick. And we looked at the ornament of a slide, the concept of sliding, and explored that a little bit. In this video, let's look at hammer-on, which is another common left-hand ornament or technique that you learn to either emphasize melody or to spice up something you're already playing. So I'm going to zoom in with my camera here. Hopefully I'll stay in the same camera shot. And let's look at some common hammer-on positions. Now again, you can hammer anywhere on any string just like you did the slides. Same rule applies. You can hammer anywhere you like. But I'm going to give you some of the real common hammer-on positions that you might encounter if you're new to this kind of thing. Now, before we talk about any specific fret location, obviously we need to understand what the hammer-on means. Hammer-on sounds like the description, hammer-on. The title, hammer-on, leads you to think that you're hammering something, right? So if I were to play, I don't know, I'm going to play the open 4th string with my thumb of my right hand, and I'm only going to play that string one time, and then I'm going to hammer down with one of the fingers of my left hand. So one of my fingers is like a miniature hammer. And if you'll notice what happens, I'm only playing one note with my thumb in this case. I'm playing the 4th string one time, but you're going to hear two distinct notes. Again. Now you notice I'm trying to hammer directly behind the fret, somewhere in that area. I'm not way back here. I'm not hammering directly to the top of the fret. And if I don't use enough pressure, in other words, if I don't hit that hammer quite hard enough, I get this. You just get a dead sound. So in order to get a good clean sounding hammer, you do need to use some kind of moderate pressure, down force, when you hit the fingerboard, and hold the note down when you hammer to it so that the note will develop. Now, hammer-ons have time duration values just like slides and just like the notes we play in rolls. So a hammer can be an 8th, it can be a 16th, depending on, if we had a metronome running. It can be a whole note, a half note, quarter note, dotted note. So by you determining how long you let that hammer-on note ring, you can determine what kind of time value that note has, which is important again when you're trying to use these things in the context, can't say that word, in the context of rolls and licks. If you try to do a hammer-on inside the context of these ideas, you need to make sure you have a good grasp of how long should that note last. And most of the time you kind of get a feel for it, but there are time values associated with these notes. Now, the note that I'm using for an example is actually one of the more common hammer-on positions that I was going to show you anyway, so that kind of worked out well. And again, all I'm doing with this finger is playing the note once. Now, you can do multiple hammer-ons. I mean, that's a triple hammer-on. And I only pick the 4th string one time with my thumb, but I get 3 distinct notes. So hammer-ons not only sound different than just fretting notes. See, in this case, I'm using my thumb multiple times. I'm playing the thumb open, thumb, 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 thumb. So I have to keep doing this with my right hand to play each of those open, fretted, open, fretted, open, fretted, open, fretted. So even though I'm playing the same notes with a hammer-on, there's a distinct sound difference between this and this. So there's a difference in the tonality of the note and the way it feels. Another common hammer-on position for people who are new at this, new bluegrass players, is to hammer on the second fret of the third string. That's another common area. I'm going to go ahead and give you a little tip here. You will find that as you move across the strings to the smaller gauge of strings, to the smaller size strings, it takes more hammering force to get a good clean note. And make sure that you stay pretty close to the fret that you intend to hammer onto. Don't actually hammer to the top of the fret. Hammer slightly behind it. Don't get way behind the fret like here. So if you say I'm going to hammer the third string at the second fret, you don't want to be back here and you don't want to be directly on the fret. You want to be kind of behind it. So here's the third string second fret hammer on. And again, I'm using slightly more pressure when I hold down this note. Another common hammer position is the first string second string first fret. Let me spit it out. Another common location is the first string second fret. Trying to keep my other fingers out of the way, so sorry if I'm having a hard time seeing this. Now, other very common locations for these hammer-on notes is when you have more than one finger down. So one of the first hammer-on positions that a lot of players learn in the context of a familiar song is something like Foggy Mountain Breakdown. So another common idea in stroke style is to already have a note fretted. In this case, I have the second string fretted at the second fret, and I want to hammer down one fret higher on the second string. So I want to keep this finger planted, and while I do a roll pattern, so you hear that I have one note already planted, and I'm going to zoom in all the way here, but you're going to hear this note after this note. So here's the first note you'll hear, and then you hear the note after it. First note is this note, second string, second fret, and then hammering to the third fret. Another common location is to hammer from 2 to 3 on the third string also. And you can also sometimes hammer, I've heard this, hammer from 2 to 3 on the fourth. But the main thing to absorb from this video is that, you know, what the motion of a hammer-on is, what it means, what it's doing for you. And then just remember, you can hammer any string at any fret. And of course, you're going to get a lot of unique sounds. Some sounds will sound familiar, and some will be kind of offbeat because of the places you're choosing to hammer. You can hammer from one fret to another, one fretted note to another. You can do multiple hammers. But the motion of a hammer-on is pretty much always the same, even if you're doing multiple hammer-ons. So experiment with these hammers, and remember to get good tone. Watch your fretting positions. Don't fret too far away from the intended position. So if it's a second fret hammer-on, don't hit directly on top of the fret, even though that sounds like what you should do. You should actually be just slightly behind the fret, not way back here. And remember, whatever finger you choose to hammer with, make sure you use pretty good force, and to slightly increase the amount of force you use for the hammer as you get to the smaller strings. And I hope this is helpful to you, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll look at some more left-hand ornaments. Thank you.